Welcome to, your deep dive into everything Germany. We've got a stack of sources right here, ready to uncover what makes this nation, well, tick.
It's a lot more than just beer and lederhosen, I can tell you that.
Oh, for sure. You wanted something, beyond the stereotypes, and these sources, they dive deep into Germany's history, culture, its place in the world. Whether you're getting ready for a meeting, planning a trip, or just really curious, we're about to get you up to speed. Let's start with Germany right now, like a snapshot.
All right, so picture this. A country right in the heart of Europe, bordered by 9 other countries. Strategically important, to say the least. Over 82 million people call it home, which makes it the EU's most populous country.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that populated.
It's true. But here's a fun fact. Geographically, it's about the size of Montana.
Really? Not as big as I would thought.
Sure.
But what about their economy? We always hear economic powerhouse, but what's that actually mean when we talk about Germany?
Well, it means they have the 4th largest economy globally, just behind the US, China, and Japan.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really interesting is how they got there. Think high-quality exports, like their cars. Everyone knows Mercedes-Benz, BMW. But it's not just cars. Machinery, chemicals, even pharmaceuticals.
Pharmaceuticals. Okay, that wasn't on my bingo card.
Right. You don't always think of that, but it just goes to show how diverse and innovative their economy really is.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got modern Germany in a nutshell. But to really get this country, you kind of have to talk about its history.
Oh, definitely.
And listener, buckle up, because we're talking about a wild ride here.
You're not kidding. We're talking about a history that goes back over 600,000 years. Think prehistoric settlements.
Wow.
But for our purposes, let's fast forward a bit to a time when Germany, as we know it, didn't even exist. We're talking ancient Germanic tribes clashing with the Roman Empire, those kinds of things.
Now, that's some history you don't always learn in school.
Exactly. And there's one event that really stands out. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD. The Germanic tribes, they actually defeated the Romans pretty decisively. This basically stopped the Roman Empire from expanding further into Germania.
So this was a turning point. It actually, shaped the map of Europe as we know it.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine if that battle had gone differently. It really shows how important the idea of independence has been for Germany for a long time. Now, getting from these scattered tribes to a unified Germany, well, that was a long and complicated process.
Yeah, I bet.
You've got Charlemagne's massive empire in the 9th century, then the Holy Roman Empire rises, and that was a handful. Imagine all these different territories trying to work together as one.
And that lasted for 900 years? Talk about complicated.
It definitely wasn't simple, but it shows this constant back and forth in German history. Unity and then fragmentation. Fast forward to the 16th century, and you've got the Protestant Reformation. Talk about another game changer. Martin Luther, the 95 Thesis, challenging the Catholic Church. And it wasn't just about religion. It had a huge impact on politics, on society, especially in what would eventually become Germany.
Yeah, it's like the epicenter of that whole thing was right there in Germany.
Exactly. And those changes, they echoed for centuries. Okay, so now let's jump ahead to the 1800s. This is where we see Prussia really start to rise to power, strong, military, ambitious leaders, Otto von Bismarck being the big one.
Oh, Bismarck. This is where things start to sound a little more familiar.
Yes, and the consequences were huge. Bismarck, he basically engineers the Franco-Prussian War in 1871. That paves the way for Germany to unify, this time under Prussian leadership.
So that's the birth of the German Empire.
Exactly. Germany's now a major player on the world stage. But as we'll see, this new strength, this new ambition, it plays a role in the lead up to World War I.
And that's something we definitely can't gloss over in German history.
Right. It's a complicated period, one that still shapes how we understand Germany. The devastation of that war, the Treaty of Versailles and its effects on German society, the rise of these extremist ideologies. These all contributed to the rise of Nazi Germany and the horrors of World War II, including the Holocaust, the genocide against Jews and other minorities.
A truly horrific moment in history that Germany is still coming to terms with.
Absolutely. A reminder that we have to learn from the past, to prevent these things from happening again.
For sure. And then after the Second World War, Germany goes through another huge change. No more unified nation. Now we have East and West Germany.
It was a tale of two Germanys, really completely different ideologies, ways of life. West Germany allied with the West, embracing democracy, capitalism. And then you have East Germany under Soviet control, a communist state. And of course, the Berlin Wall, built in 1961.
The literal symbol of the Cold War, splitting a country and families in half.
Yeah, a stark reminder of the human cost of those ideological battles. But this division, as we know, wouldn't last forever. 1989, the year the Berlin Wall comes down.
Wow. What a moment in history. What led to that?
It was a lot of things. Growing unrest in East Germany, a weakening Soviet Union, but the biggest factor, the courage of everyday people who wanted freedom. They chipped away at that wall, both literally and figuratively,
Like incredible.
until it finally crumbled.
And that cleared the path for reunification. 1990, a new chapter for Germany. What a journey we've been on just to get to this point.
And believe me, that's just the beginning.
I bet. We've covered so much, but we've really only scratched the surface of what makes modern-day Germany so fascinating. So we've gone from ancient Germania to a divided nation and finally reunification. What a ride. But what about Germany's place in the world today? What defines that?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. It's a country wrestling with its past, but also being a leader on big global issues. Remember those economic engines we were talking about? Well, a lot of that now is about renewable energy. They've really become front runners there.
You know, it's funny you should say that. I was looking through these sources earlier, and it seems like Germany is really taking a stand against nuclear energy, especially after, well, Fukushima.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Fukushima was a game changer for them. They're investing a ton in wind power, solar power, aiming to get all their electricity from renewable sources by 2035.
2035. Wow. That's pretty ambitious. It makes you wonder, though, what are the challenges of making a transition that big?
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. Think about it, relying on things like wind and solar, which can be unpredictable. And then there's the economic side. Germany's known for its industries, right? And changing up your energy sources like that, well, that's expensive. It's a real balancing act.
It's never as simple as people think, is it? There's always more to it.
Exactly. And this idea of, tackling tough issues head on, it comes up a lot in Germany. Look at 2015, the refugee crisis. A lot of countries were closing their borders.
Oh.
But Germany, led by Angela Merkel at the time, decided to welcome over 1 million refugees and migrants.
I remember that. It was a really powerful example of, trying to put your ideals into action on a global scale.
For sure, it was a turning point, and it caused a lot of debate, both within Germany and across Europe. Were there challenges, of course, bringing in so many people so quickly, but it also showed that Germany was willing to be a compassionate and inclusive nation.
Right. It reminds us that even with the best intentions, some problems don't have easy solutions. So we've talked about energy, immigration, but what about German culture today? Like, what should people know beyond all the cliches?
Well, we've got to address the elephant in the room, Oktoberfest. Yes, it's real, and yes, there's a lot of beer, but it's just one part of a much bigger, more diverse culture.
Yeah, it's easy to get stuck on those stereotypes, isn't it? So what are we missing? What's hiding behind the lederhosen and pretzels?
Oh, well, there are Christmas markets, for one. If you ever get the chance, go to one. It's like stepping into a fairy tale. The smells, the lights, all the handmade decorations, it's magical.
You're making me want to book a flight right now.
And the food. I mean, yes, there are sausages and potatoes, but did you know Germany has more types of bread than any other country? Over 3,000.
Wait, really? More than France?
That's true. A bread lover's paradise. And of course, you can't forget their love of football.
Oh, right. Football, or soccer as we call it here sometimes. They're pretty serious about it over there.
It's practically a religion. 4-time World Cup champions, incredibly passionate fans. It's a huge point of national pride.
I love how sports can do that, bring people together like that.
It's really something. And speaking of things that bring people together, there's something else about German culture that's really important. Their focus on literacy, on education. It's a nation of readers, of thinkers.
We saw a lot about that in those articles. Something about a huge book fair, right?
The Frankfurt Book Fair. It's the biggest and oldest book fair in the world. And it speaks to their love of books. And it's not just by chance either. Their whole education system is top-notch. Free public education, including university.
Wow, free university. That's amazing. No wonder there's such a hub for innovation.
Exactly. Investing in education is investing in the future, right?
Right.
And it's clearly been working for them.
So we've got this commitment to renewable energy, a humanitarian response to the refugee crisis, a rich culture. It's clear that modern Germany, it's a country of complexities. It's asking some big questions, both at home and on the world stage.
It's constantly evolving, isn't it? And that brings us to something really interesting about Germany's future.
So we've covered Germany's past, we've looked at the present, and it really seems like they're at a crossroads now. Based on all this, what are some things to keep in mind about Germany's future?
Well, one thing that jumps out is just how present reunification still is.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's been over 30 years since the Berlin Wall came down, but there are still these disparities between the former East and West.
Right. Like, it's not just about tearing down a wall and everything magically becoming equal.
Exactly. We're talking about different economic realities, social systems that were totally separate for decades. You know, it creates these really specific challenges, even within a unified country.
It makes you think about the human impact of these huge historical moments beyond just the politics of it all.
For sure. And speaking of big moments, Germany's role in the world, that's another fascinating thing to consider. I mean, they've been this economic powerhouse, a big voice for diplomacy. But how do they deal with, well, how messy geopolitics are these days?
It's interesting because historically they've been a little hesitant to take on a super assertive leadership role, right? Because of their past. But now, with the economic influence they have, their stance on things like climate change, it feels like they could really change the conversation globally.
It's a tough spot to be in, you know.
Yeah.
Step up and maybe cause some waves, or keep working more behind the scenes. And how does that impact their relationships with other countries? It's all up in the air, really. Only time will tell.
Makes you think about the long game, right? Like, how much do the decisions being made now affect what happens down the road?
Absolutely. And that leads us to the big question, the one we'll leave our listeners with. How does Germany, with all its history, how does it make sense of its past while also looking towards the future? It's taken steps to own up to its history, but how do they continue to do that while also forging a new path forward? It's a tough question, no doubt, but it's one that's going to keep shaping Germany for years to come.
Really reminds you that understanding a country, especially one as complex as Germany, it's a process. You can't just scratch the surface. It's about going beyond those first impressions, you know, to see the nuances, the contradictions, all the things that make it so interesting.
Well said.
So there you have it, listener. Your deep dive into all things Germany. We've journeyed through their past, explored where they stand today, and looked at those big questions on the horizon. Hopefully this has given you a good starting point, something to think about, maybe even inspired you to learn more on your own.
Absolutely. Happy exploring.